Բարեկամներ, Սփյուռքի ձայնը հեռուստահանդեսը ժամանակ առ ժամանակ սիրով ձեզ է ներկայացնում հայ անհատներին։ Ճանաչենք մեր կողքին ապրող հայ անվանի մարդկանց։ Այս հաղորդաշարից այսօր ձեզ ենք ուզում ներկայացնել Margaret Ajemianին, դրանտակոցը գրքի հեղինակին։
Recently, Voice of Armenians TV sat down with Margaret Ajemian Ahnert to talk about her book, Knock on the Door. While there have been many books published on the subject of Armenian genocide, Knock at the Door stands apart. The narration of the book is both personal and unique, giving us a first-hand account of the tragic events. Margaret Ajemian Ahnert was born in New York City. She has an MFA from Goucher College and a BA from Goddard College, and is a graduate of the Barnes Foundation. She has pursued a variety of careers, producing television documentaries, lecturing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and teaching art appreciation through the Art Goes to School program in elementary schools. Her book, Knock at the Door, won the USA Book News Award for Best Book 2007 and the New York Book Festival Award for Best Historical Memoirs 2008. She has also been awarded the Musa Da Medal of Honor and the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. Her book, Knock at the Door, is now required reading in schools across the nation. Ahnert writes of her relationship with her mother, Esther, as she approaches 99 years of age in an Armenian nursing home in New York. Esther's childhood in a rural town was characterized by hard work and enriched by traditional customs and celebrations. That life was destroyed in 1915 when the Ottoman government expelled Armenians from their homes, confiscated their property, and orchestrated the first genocide of the 20th century.
Our guest today is Margaret Ajemian Ahnert. Thank you very much for being at our show. I've been looking forward to this opportunity to speak with you and introduce you to our audience. And I want to begin our interview discussing your book, The Knock at the Door. It is obviously a very powerful and personal story. It's a story of your mother, a survival of Armenian genocide. Can you tell us a little bit more, what's the essence of this book?
Well, growing up as a little girl, my mother told me stories about her life. My mother was 15 when the genocide began in her little town of Amasya in Turkey. She was living in this little farmhouse, a little rural city. They really were not political, apolitical is what they were, but when it started, it went through the whole country. And they were marched out, left their homes. Her father was taken first, and then she was left with a mother, a grandmother, and a young brother. And they decided to leave. She also had an older brother from her first, she was an adopted child, and that brother was in the Turkish army, and he said, leave before you're told to leave. It will be too late. But they waited. They didn't believe that this could happen. They really loved their Turkish neighbors, and he told them a story once about how a Turkish neighbor said to his Armenian neighbor, don't worry, we are friends. Your wife and my wife are friends. Your children play with my children. Don't worry, when the order comes, I will sharpen and hone my knives so that your family feels no pain. This was his act of friendship. Can you imagine this? So they waited, and then it was too late. They were marched out to the desert. She was raped, beaten, married to a Turkish man against her will, thrown off a cliff, thrown into a wagon with dead bodies, and she lived. She survived to tell me these stories. It's amazing that she could. Thrown off a cliff, she hung on a branch and somebody pulled her back. Can you imagine? I can't. It was the Euphrates, and she could see the bodies floating beneath her, and she wanted to die. One day I said to her, Mom, why didn't God step in and save the Armenians? Surely he could have. And she said to me, very matter-of-factly, well, when I see him, I'll ask him.
It's a classic Armenian optimism.
Very optimistic, very upscale, upbeat, and so this is how she survived.
I'm sure it was very difficult to revisit this dark period in history of our
More
of our
difficult
people.
for me, Haig, than my
Precisely.
mother. More difficult for me because genes and fear, like genes, trickles down from you to me, from me to my children. What will they inherit from me? I inherited this fear of Turks, anger, sadness from my mother. I don't want it. I want to be rid of it. So I want to find a nice Turk and put my arms around him and give him a hug. I said this one time in an interview. It was NPR in Seattle. And they put that interview on YouTube. It's there still today. And the woman who was my driver for the whole week in California was Turkish. She told me at the last day, and I jumped up and I hugged her and I gave her a big kiss. And I called the studio and I said, Mike, Amy, my driver, she's Turkish. I found my Turk. I was happy. I was happy because she was so good and kind. There was no reason for me to fear her. But still, there's Turkish cab drivers in New York who say, are you Armenian? If I ask about their name. And they'll say, oh, that never happened. Yeah. That's a lie. Don't believe it. That never happened. And I quickly retaliate with, yes, it did. It happened to my mother. It happened to my grandparents. It did happen. And I'm upset about that. Yes. I don't want to be upset. I want them to say, we did it, we're sorry, just like we did to the American Indians, my country did, and we say we're sorry. They say it never happened. So.
You know, I'm slightly jumping ahead, but when I was doing research for this interview, I believe there was actually a Turkish individual from Australia who contacted you and actually came forward saying that we are with you and we're recognizing the atrocities that have been done. And I'm sure that was a type of reconciliation that you've been looking for.
Yes, but that came as a result of an outburst when I was at Barnes & Noble. In 2007, when my book first came out, I was at Barnes & Noble, 86th Street, and I was my first time in New York. I was very happy. The former governor of New York, Hugh Carey, was in the audience. Robert Morgenthau, district attorney, was in the audience. He gave me a blurb. I'll tell you about that in a minute, but Robert Morgenthau was there. And as I started to speak, 5 Turkish men ran around the room screaming, you're a liar, handing out pamphlets saying, she's a liar. That never happened. There was no genocide. And I was terrified. I froze. And the governor focused me. He talked to me. Now, Margaret, tell me about your mother, Esther. And I thought, he must be crazy. You know, all of this is happening. But he's a politician, so he knows about crazy people screaming in a room. And he quickly focused me and didn't let me run away, didn't let me cry. I stood my ground, and he was very good at that. And then they were handcuffed and taken away. And when we left there, we went to Elaine's in New York. And I know Elaine, and she said, what happened? I heard what happened at Barnes & Noble. And I said, oh, she said, what do you need? I said, I need a martini and a red bloody steak. Like a warrior, because warriors eat red meat and they drink whiskey after a battle. I had just come from battle and I needed that. As I was eating, she said, Margaret, that's Bobby Zarin, the biggest publicist in New York City. He wants to talk to you in the kitchen. So from the kitchen at Elaine's, Bobby Zarin called the New York Times. It made front pages. New York Times, London Times, the Spanish Times, the International World Tribune. So the Turks launched my book. It couldn't have been a better thing for me.
Listening to you and knowing how difficult it was for you to write this book and the hardships that you have gone through and the fears that you endured to tell this story, the question that came to me naturally is, why did you write this book?
The reason this genocide is not recognized today, as it should be, is because when the Armenians came to this country, they told one another, mortsid, and that is the Armenian word for forget. Forget, don't talk about it. Amote, it's a shame. So if you don't tell your neighbor, and you don't tell your friends and your family, or new family, what happened to you? Who's going to know? If you don't tell your government, who's going to know? The Armenians kept it a secret. The Jewish people who survived the Holocaust came to this country and they said, remember, remember, never again remember. And Robert Morgenthau once said to me, Margaret, that is why I believe that the Armenian genocide has not been recognized, because the Armenians let the world forget about it. Well, I decided I'm not going to let them forget about it. I decided I'm marching here, not just to Armenians, though I love their support. They know the story. I'm not preaching to the choir. I have been across the nation twice, speaking at Harvard and Yale and Stanford and Brigham Young, telling the Odars what happened. And there are so many Odars who say, my God, we never learned about that. My book is now in several schools as required reading. Every year there's several schools in Greenwich in Connecticut who call me. Every year the English teacher uses my book as an example. The children read it, and every year it's a different class. And they call me and we do a telephone interview.
Did your mom knew that you were planning to write this book?
Oh, my mother knew all along.
And what was her thoughts
She was
about
very
it?
happy about it. She said, you know, when I die, my stories will die with me, and I want your children and your family to know what their grandmother went through. So she was happy. In fact, she was an ethnic lady, but I did a little interview with her, and I had it recorded somewhere. I don't know where it is now, but I said to her, Mother, all I had was a manuscript. I didn't have a book then. I said, Mother, I've written a book about your life. And she said, really? I must sign it. She said that as she was the British land, owner who said, I must sign it, my little ethnic Armenian mother.
Even though there's been, a lot has been written about Armenian genocide, what I consider unique about this book is that it's told through such a personal pair of eyes. And usually they say, if you want to show me the atrocity of war, tell me a story of one person.
Well,
because you feel it close to your heart.
You're exactly right. Robert Morgenthau gave me a blurb, and every Armenian that has written a book takes it to Robert Morgenthau because his grandfather was the ambassador to Turkey in 1915, as you know. And he said to me, when I gave him the book, he said, Margaret, every Armenian wants my name on their book. I can't do it. I'm a district attorney. I'm a public figure. No, I'm sorry. But I'll read the book, and thank you for the book. 2 weeks later, he called me. He said, this is the finest first-person narrative I have read on the subject. I want my name on this book.
There's lighter side to this book.
Yes.
From what I understood, your mother was a joyful, life-loving, which is quite incredible to think about that.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about this other side of her.
It's interesting because psychology was part of my undergraduate degree, and when you have horrible things happen to you, you try to forget them and you fill that with something funny. It's part of the secure factor to make you go live, to survive. You need to find something else or you can't do it. And she was a jokester. She was always telling funny stories. And in here are recipes that she gave me. So many Odars say, oh, I learned this recipe in your book. I love it. I'm going to make this. Fasuya gera good. So it's very nice. I'm sort of spreading the food Armenian food word around too.
For good reasons.
For good reasons. It's good. They like it.
What are your plans?
I'm working on another book, but it takes a lot of energy. I would like to see it made into a movie. That's my major goal. I have been offered some scripts. I also have had offers of a drama on stage. I guess I'm just looking for something on a larger scale. I don't want it to be just another wonderful Armenian documentaries are fabulous, but I'm looking for a Schindler's List. And you know the Armenian wrote that. Steve Zalian is an Armenian writer. He wrote the script for Schindler's List. So I'm hoping I find him one day and I lay him down on the floor and push my book in his face. Also, my book will be reviewed And I will be speaking at the Glendale Public Library on June 27th to hopefully a very large audience. I have spoken again at Harvard and Yale, and audiences are always very full. I'm very happy about that. So during that week of June 27th, I will be speaking at UCLA, Fresno, probably San Francisco. So check my website, and I will have those dates and places on there.
Thank you so much for this interview. I'm sure it was as fascinating to my audience as it was for me. And best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed talking with you.